The great starship Eclipse drifted through the endless dark of space. Its silver hull reflected the light of distant suns as it carried hundreds of crew members from different worlds. Among them was a single human, Commander Mara, who had served in the Alliance fleet for almost a decade. To most of the crew, he was strange but reliable. To some, he was a mystery wrapped in old scars and calm silence. Inside the main council chamber, a meeting was taking place. The room was bright and cold, built of glass and steel. Around the oval table sat representatives from 5 species, each one speaking for their people. At the center stood Ambassador Vereen of the Thalari, a tall being with blue skin and silver eyes. She believed deeply in reason and order, and she often found humans unpredictable. Her patience with Mara had been growing thin for weeks. Mara stood opposite her, wearing his dark armor, the plates marked by burns and dents from many battles. He had been explaining a defense strategy to protect a mining colony near the border of the outer systems. The colony was under threat from raiders who ignored treaties and warnings. His plan relied on quick response teams and risky maneuvers. Vereen called it reckless. "We cannot rely on instinct and chaos," Vereen said, her voice sharp. "Your kind always rushes forward without thought. You throw yourselves into danger as if pain teaches wisdom. It does not." Mara remained quiet for a moment. His dark eyes met hers without anger. "We act fast because delay costs lives," he said. "Sometimes we cannot think our way out." "We must move." Vereen's silver eyes narrowed. "That is exactly the problem. You humans act as if courage replaces logic. You win battles but lose worlds. You celebrate survival instead of progress. Your bravery is only stubbornness dressed as honor." A murmur spread among the council members. Some looked uncomfortable, others curious. The human did not raise his voice. He only stood straighter, his expression calm. "You think courage is foolishness," he said. "But courage is what kept the Alliance alive when logic failed." Vereen stepped closer, her voice cold. "And yet it was your courage that led to the loss of 2 ships last month. How many of your soldiers died because you refused to retreat when you should have? You call it bravery. I call it blind pride." The air in the room seemed to grow heavy. Mara's jaw tightened, but he still did not reply with anger. The silence stretched. The other council members shifted in their seats, sensing the growing tension. Finally, Vereen spoke again, her tone harsh and final. "You humans are a race of reckless dreamers. You fight like animals and call it purpose. You cling to hope even when hope has no logic. You are a danger to yourselves and to us." Her words cut through the air like a blade. No one spoke. The hum of the ship's engines filled the stillness. Mara's gaze did not waver. He looked at her for a long moment. Then, without a single word, he reached up and unsealed the locks on his armor. The magnetic clasps released with a quiet hiss. He lifted the heavy chest plate from his shoulders and set it gently on the table before him. The sound of metal meeting metal echoed through the chamber. He removed the rest of the armor piece by piece, moving with calm precision. When he was done, he stood there in the simple black uniform beneath it. He did not look defeated. He looked tired. Not from the weight of the armor, but from the weight of being misunderstood. Everyone watched as he stepped back from the table. "If that is what you believe," he said softly, "then you will not need me to lead your defense." Vereen blinked, surprised. "Commander, that is not what I meant." Mara shook his head. "No, Ambassador. You meant every word. And perhaps you are right. Perhaps humans do not belong here." He turned and walked toward the exit. His boots made a steady sound against the floor, each step echoing in the silence he left behind. No one stopped him. The doors opened, and the light from the corridor fell across his back as he left the room. When the doors closed again, the chamber remained still. Vereen stood where she was, her silver eyes on the armor lying on the table. The plates were scratched and worn, proof of battles fought for the Alliance. She felt a strange heaviness in her chest, something she could not explain. She told herself it was relief, but it did not feel like relief at all. Mara walked through the quiet halls of the Eclipse. The corridors were long and filled with soft blue light from the energy lines that ran along the walls. Crew members who saw him stepped aside silently. They had heard the argument. News traveled fast aboard a ship, even one this large. Mara did not look at them. He walked with steady purpose, though he had nowhere to go. He passed the observation deck and paused for a moment. Through the wide glass window, he saw the stars stretching across the darkness. They looked cold and distant, yet somehow familiar. The sight reminded him of home, of Earth, though he had not seen it in many years. He missed the blue of its sky, the warmth of sunlight and the sound of rain. In space, everything was too quiet. He rested his hand on the glass. His reflection looked back at him, tired but calm. He had been called many things in his life. Reckless, brave, foolish, loyal. None of those words truly mattered anymore. What mattered was that he had tried to help and it was no longer wanted. Behind him, the door opened softly. It was Lieutenant Corin, a young engineer from a desert planet called Arian. He respected Mara more than anyone else on the ship. "Commander," he said quietly. "The Council did not mean to." Mara raised a hand, stopping him. "They meant every word, Corin, and it is all right. Sometimes people need to believe they are safer without us." Corin frowned. "But we are not safe without you." "Everyone knows that." Mara gave a faint smile. "You will learn to be. That is what makes you stronger." The young engineer wanted to argue, but Mara's calm tone made it impossible. He watched as Mara turned away and continued down the corridor. The human steps grew softer as he disappeared around the corner, leaving only silence behind. Back in the council chamber, the meeting had fallen apart. The alien representatives spoke in hushed voices. Some criticized Varine's words, while others defended her. The atmosphere had changed. For years, humans had been the backbone of the Alliance's defense. Their ability to act under pressure, to adapt, to push through fear, had saved countless lives. Without them, the fleet would not have survived the early wars. Varine sat alone after the others left. The armor still lay on the table before her. She reached out and touched the surface. It was cold. Her reflection appeared in the metal, distorted and unfamiliar. She wondered why she felt so uneasy. Humans had always been unpredictable, but this time the quiet dignity in Mara's departure unsettled her. She remembered the stories she had heard about humans before she met one. Tales of how they endured harsh worlds, how they survived disasters that would have destroyed others, how they kept believing when reason said there was no hope. She had dismissed those tales as exaggerations. Now for the first time she was not sure. She stood up and looked at the door where he had left. The silence of the room pressed against her thoughts. For a moment she wanted to call him back, but pride held her still. She turned away, but her reflection in the armor seemed to follow her. In the lower decks of the Eclipse, Mara found an empty storage bay and sat down on a crate. The room smelled faintly of oil and dust. He removed the gloves from his hands and rubbed his palms together, feeling the rough skin. He thought of his crew, of the soldiers who had trusted him, of the missions they had survived. He thought of how words could hurt more than wounds, yet he felt no anger toward Varine. She had spoken what she believed, and belief was hard to change. He looked at the floor and took a slow breath. "Reckless dreamers," he whispered to himself. "Maybe that is what we are." Above him, the engines hummed softly. The ship continued its path through the stars. Somewhere far ahead lay another sunrise, another battle, another chance to prove that courage was more than pride. But for now, Mara stayed in the quiet of the lower decks, away from the noise of judgment and politics. The stars outside kept shining, cold and patient, as if waiting for him to rise again. The starship Eclipse drifted silently through the emptiness of space. The corridors seemed longer now that Mara was absent from the council and command rooms. Crew members moved quickly but quietly, as if the weight of the missing human hung over them. Machines hummed and lights flickered in the distance. Every system ran as it should, yet something felt incomplete. Lieutenant Corin walked down the hall to the command deck, his hands trembling slightly. He had been with Mara for months, seeing him lead and solve problems no one else could. Mara had a way of noticing the small details, the unnoticed cracks in the ship, and fixing them before they became disasters. Now the crew tried to fill the gaps, but every decision seemed heavier. Captain Rallis, the human-leaning officer from the planet Viridian, stood near the communication console, staring at the holographic star map. He frowned as he tapped the display, running calculations. "We should have sent reconnaissance drones ahead," he said. But no one thought to. Mara always would have. Corin approached him. "Commander Mara is not here," he said. "We must manage without him." Rallis turned his gray eyes toward Corin. "Yes, we must. But I did not expect it to feel this wrong." He paused and ran a hand over his short-cropped hair. "He makes leadership look easy. I did not realize how much I relied on him until now." The corridors of the ship were alive with quiet activity. Engineers adjusted systems Mara had left running, yet small failures began to appear. A power conduit on Deck 7 sparked briefly, forcing 2 maintenance bots to rush to the scene. Corin watched from a distance, his stomach twisting with unease. Mara would have seen the problem before it occurred, and he would have solved it with calm hands. Meanwhile, Vereen sat alone in her quarters, staring at the star field outside her window. Her silver eyes reflected the distant light of a binary star system. She had thought her words would push Mara away, perhaps even teach him humility. Instead, they had revealed something she had never understood. Humans did not flee from anger or insult. They could step away from conflict and still carry strength inside them. Her pride struggled with this understanding. Vereen remembered the council room, how he had silently set down his armor and walked away. She had expected rage, shouting, or at least resistance. Instead, he had left with dignity. Her chest felt tight as she recalled the metal armor lying in front of her, reflecting her own image. She could not look away. In the ship's lower decks, Mara had made a temporary space for himself. He had moved crates together to create a simple seat and small table. A single light hovered over the area, casting warm yellow onto the metal floor. It was a place free from judgment, politics, and constant orders. Here, he could breathe. Mara opened a small maintenance panel and began to check a wiring system. It was a simple task, but it grounded him. Hands that had held weapons now moved gently over wires and circuits. Every connection he repaired made the ship more reliable. It reminded him that even when the world rejected him, he could still contribute quietly. A soft alarm echoed from the deck above. Mara looked up and frowned. The sensor readings indicated a minor power fluctuation. He walked swiftly to the maintenance corridor and saw a junction overheating. He knelt, tracing the wires, adjusting the voltage, and replacing a worn circuit. Within minutes, the system returned to normal. No one praised him. No one even knew he had fixed it. But Mara felt satisfaction. This was his way of showing strength. Time passed slowly aboard the Eclipse. Days seemed to stretch into one another. Mara rarely left the lower decks, yet his presence was felt by every crew member. Systems ran smoother, meals were cooked more efficiently, and supplies were organized with meticulous care. The human who had stepped away from command became the unseen force holding the ship together. Vereen began to notice the small things too. Supplies arrived on schedule. Communications from other ships remained clear and uninterrupted. Even the younger crew members, usually anxious and clumsy, moved with a kind of quiet confidence. She could not explain it, but she sensed a human influence she had underestimated. Corin visited Mara one evening, carrying a cup of warm, nutrient drink. "You should rest, Commander," he said. "The ship depends on you, even if you are hiding down here." Mara took the cup and nodded. "Rest is good," he said, "but I cannot leave this place. Something is always at risk. If I do nothing, small problems grow." Corin frowned. "You are not doing nothing. You are saving the ship in ways no one sees, but maybe the others need to know you are still here." Mara smiled faintly, a small curve of his lips. "Recognition is not my goal. The crew must survive. That is enough." That night, Mara stood by the observation deck again. The stars seemed sharper, brighter than before. He watched distant worlds spinning silently, wondering how many civilizations faced problems without hope. Humans did not always fight the largest battles. Sometimes they fixed small problems unnoticed. But those small acts were just as important. Vereen walked past the observation deck, her hands folded. She saw Mara in the distance, his figure still and quiet. She stopped and studied him. He did not glance at her. He seemed untouched by fear or pride. She realized she had been wrong about humans. They did not need constant recognition or praise to do what was right. Meanwhile, on Deck 9, a message came through the ship's internal network. The mining colony near the outer systems had reported a series of disturbances. Small skirmishes with raider ships had begun. The Council had not expected them so soon. The fleet would need leadership and strategy. The thought of Mara came to Vereen's mind immediately. She had doubted his judgment before, yet now she feared the consequences of his absence. Captain Rallis convened an emergency meeting in the command deck. "We need a plan," he said. "The colony is under threat. The fleet is too far to respond immediately. Mara would know what to do, but he is not here." Vereen hesitated. Her pride resisted the thought of asking him for help. She had been cruel, and yet the human's absence now threatened the lives of thousands. Finally she spoke, voice tight with unease. "Perhaps it is time to find him. We cannot do this alone." The search began slowly. Crew members went to every known location: lower decks, maintenance bays, storage areas. Mara was not in the common areas. Corin led the search, moving carefully through the ship. When he finally found the quiet corner where Mara had been living, he stopped and whispered, "Commander, the colony needs us. The fleet needs us." Mara looked at him calmly, as if he had expected this moment. "I know," he said. "I will act when it is necessary. But first we must understand what we face. Rash decisions lead to mistakes." Corin nodded. "Then let us prepare. We will follow your lead even from here. We will not fail." Mara allowed a faint smile to touch his lips. He was still quiet, still calm, but a spark of energy returned to his eyes. His hands moved quickly, pulling schematics from the ship's data network. He began planning strategies, analyzing routes, predicting enemy movements. Even in silence, he was already a leader. Vereen observed from a distance. She felt a strange mixture of awe and regret. The human who had been insulted and ignored still carried strength far beyond her understanding. His patience, his intelligence, and his calm determination were more powerful than any argument or weapon. She realized that humans were not only brave, they were quietly unstoppable. The crew began to notice the change. Systems stabilized. Supplies were organized. Plans were drafted and reviewed. Even the youngest officers, once hesitant, moved with purpose. Mara had returned to influence them without speaking, without armor, without orders. His presence alone had shifted the energy of the ship. That evening, Mara stood again by the observation deck. The stars seemed to shine brighter, not just outside but inside him. He had withdrawn to silence, yet the ship still moved, still survived. His patience and quiet strength had reminded everyone that leadership was not always loud. Sometimes it was calm, precise, and unseen. Vereen left the deck before he could notice her. Her heart felt heavier than before, yet clearer. She understood now that humans were capable of more than she could measure. They survived, adapted, and led not because they demanded recognition, but because they believed in what must be done. Mara turned from the stars and returned to the lower decks. He moved with calm confidence, ready to guide the ship when the time came. He would not rush, he would not demand. He would act when it was necessary. And when that moment arrived, everyone aboard the Eclipse would see the true strength of a human who walked away, yet never abandoned his responsibility. The ship continued its journey through the stars, quiet yet alive. The human who had stepped away from armor and words had already begun to shape the fate of the fleet in ways unseen. His silence was not weakness. It was the calm before action, the quiet preparation that only a human could provide. The stars watched in patience as the Eclipse moved forward. Somewhere beyond the dark, challenges awaited. Mara would meet them as he always had, steady, calm, and human. The calm of the starship Eclipse was about to be tested. Mara had spent days in the lower decks, repairing, organizing, and preparing, yet the crew above did not know how close they were to danger. Far away, near the outer mining colony, small raider ships had begun to strike without warning. Their attacks were swift and organized, faster than the fleet's distant reinforcements could respond. On the command deck, Captain Rallis paced, his eyes scanning the holographic maps. Communications from the colony were urgent and scattered. Messages overlapped, creating a jumble of warnings. He adjusted the displays, trying to understand the raiders' strategy. Every calculation he made showed the human-designed defenses failing. Vereen stood beside him, her silver eyes narrowed. "If Mara were here, we would know how to respond," she said. Her voice was quieter than before, almost reflective. She had expected the human to be angry after her words, yet she now understood the emptiness left in his absence. Without him, they lacked not strength but clarity. Corin appeared, holding a tablet. "Sir, we have tried all tactical simulations, but the raiders adapt too quickly. They know our patterns before we can respond." Mara always anticipated unpredictability. "We have no one to do that now." Rallis stopped pacing and ran a hand over his face. "Then we are left to survive without him," he said. "We cannot wait for the fleet. The colony may not last another day." In the lower decks, Mara continued his quiet preparations. He checked every system he had access to. Life support, energy conduits, navigation, and the ship's defensive arrays, all were examined with meticulous care. He listened to the reports coming through the communication channels, analyzing each piece of information. Mara did not rush. He did not panic. He only calculated, observed, and planned. Finally, a soft alarm went off in his sector. The power fluctuations from earlier had returned, now affecting multiple systems. Mara moved quickly, repairing damaged circuits while simultaneously rerouting energy to the shields. His hands worked with steady precision, connecting wires and adjusting controls in a rhythm almost like a dance. Above him, the command deck struggled. The crew was overwhelmed by the speed and coordination of the raiders. Ships of the outer colony were being disabled one by one. The raiders targeted supply vessels and communication hubs, cutting off the colony's ability to call for help. Every decision the crew made seemed to be countered by their unseen opponent. Verine's frustration grew. She tried to organize defense teams, but the humans she commanded lacked Mara's understanding of human improvisation. They moved quickly but predictably. She realized that her belief in logic alone had underestimated the human instinct for adaptability. Finally, in desperation, she activated the ship-wide communication channel. "Mara," she said. Her voice was firm but carried a note of pleading. "If you can hear this, we need you. The colony is under attack and we cannot respond effectively without you." In the lower decks, Mara paused. He had been listening to the reports, analyzing data, and preparing quietly. Verine's message was not an order. It was a call for help from those who had failed to anticipate danger. Mara's expression remained calm, his dark eyes steady. He rose from his seat and gathered a small toolkit. He did not speak further. There was no anger in his movements, only purpose. He walked toward the elevator that led to the command deck. The lower corridors were quiet, yet the hum of the ship's engines seemed louder as he moved. Crew members stepped aside, sensing the presence of someone who could solve problems they could not. Mara's calm determination radiated through the corridors like a steady flame. When he arrived at the command deck, the crew was in disarray. Rallis and Verine were trying to coordinate their response to the raiders, but the chaos had already reached a critical point. Mara entered silently, surveying the situation with sharp eyes. "Step back," Mara said, voice calm but commanding. "Let me see." The crew hesitated, but they knew the human had led them through impossible situations before. Slowly, they stepped aside. Mara moved to the central console, his hands flying over the controls. He accessed the sensor network, pinpointing the location of every raider ship in real time. Verine watched him work, astonished. His mind moved faster than any calculation she could make. He did not rely on logic alone. He used intuition, experience, and human adaptability. Each decision he made shifted the balance of the battle. Shields were redirected, energy was rerouted, and small defense drones were deployed with exact timing. The raiders struck again, but this time, Mara anticipated their moves. Every ship they targeted met resistance. Supply vessels were protected and communication channels were restored. The fleet's defense relied not on numbers but on Mara's understanding of unpredictability. "Captain, deploy all escort drones to the northern corridor," Mara instructed. "They will force the raiders into a predictable path. Then concentrate shield energy on the southern sector. We can trap them." Rallis nodded, impressed despite himself. "Understood." Within minutes, the raiders' strategy began to fail. Mara's plan worked with precision. The fleet of small ships found themselves blocked, forced into a narrow area where the Eclipse's defenses could target them effectively. Mara's calm, unseen calculations turned chaos into control. Verine moved closer. "How did you know?" she asked, her voice almost reverent. "How did you anticipate every move before it happened?" Mara did not stop his work. "Humans survive because we notice what others overlook," he said. "We anticipate not only what is logical but what is possible. We prepare for what others cannot predict." The raiders made one last desperate attempt. Their ships surged forward, aiming to break through the shields. Mara adjusted the defensive arrays in real time, directing drones and energy pulses to intercept. Each movement was precise, flawless, and fast. Within minutes, the raiders were retreating, unable to breach the fleet's defenses. The command deck was quiet for a moment. The crew stared at Mara, realizing they had survived against impossible odds. Rallis exhaled slowly. "I do not know how we would have managed without you," he admitted. Verine, still processing the events, stepped closer. You did not come because of pride," she said quietly. "You came because it was needed." Mara finally looked at her. His eyes were calm, but there was a quiet strength in them. "I act when action is required," he said. "Not because of anger, not because of recognition. Only because it must be done." The crew began to move with renewed energy. Mara did not command them with loud orders. He guided them with steady decisions, solving problems before they became disasters. The difference between panic and control was the human who had walked away, yet never abandoned responsibility. After the battle, Mara returned to the observation deck. He looked out at the stars and the distant colony, now safe for the moment. Virine joined him quietly. "I misjudged your kind," she said. "I thought you were reckless. I thought pride drove every action. I see now. It is something else entirely." Mara did not respond immediately. He studied the stars. "Humans are not fearless," he said finally. "We feel fear, doubt, and pain. But we do what must be done despite them. That is all." Virine nodded slowly, a quiet understanding settling over her. She had always valued logic, strategy, and calculation, yet she now understood that strength could also come from resilience, patience, and unwavering purpose. In the days that followed, Mara continued to work in the lower decks and observation areas. He repaired systems, analyzed data, and guided the crew without fanfare. The Eclipse moved steadily through space, stronger than before because one human had chosen to act with calm determination. The crew began to respect the quiet influence Mara had on them. They learned that leadership did not always mean speaking first or acting loudly. Sometimes it meant observing, calculating, and stepping in when necessary. Mara had shown them a different kind of strength, a human strength that was patient, precise, and enduring. Virine walked the corridors, reflecting on her earlier words. She had believed humans were reckless dreamers, driven only by pride and emotion. She had been wrong. Humans could act with logic, patience, and courage beyond measure. Mara's quiet presence had reminded her of that truth. Corin found Mara once more in the lower decks. "Commander," he said, "the raiders are gone. The colony is safe. You should allow yourself a moment of rest." Mara shook his head gently. "Rest will come later. There is always work to do. Small problems can grow into disasters if ignored. I cannot stop noticing them." Corin nodded, understanding that this was how humans operated. They did not act for glory. They did not act for pride. They acted because it was necessary. As Mara continued his quiet work, the Eclipse drifted through the stars, its crew stronger and wiser. They had survived a threat that could have destroyed them all, and they had learned the value of patience, calm, and the human instinct to act when it was most needed. Above all, they had learned that the human who had walked away from armor and insult was still the guiding force that could turn fear into strength and chaos into order. The stars outside shimmered with quiet patience, waiting for the next challenge. Mara would meet it in his way, calm, precise, and profoundly human. The starship Eclipse sailed through the deep quiet of space, its metallic hull gleaming faintly under the light of distant stars. After the battle with the raiders, the ship carried both relief and exhaustion. The crew had survived because of Mara, the human who had returned to lead them with calm precision. Yet the danger was not completely gone. The scanners showed energy readings in the distance. Something large and unfamiliar was following them. Captain Rallis stood on the command deck, eyes locked on the display screen. The readings flickered with irregular signals. "It is not a raider ship," he said slowly. "This is something else. Something much bigger." Virine stood beside him. Her hands were steady, but her expression was tense. "Can we identify it?" she asked. "Not yet," Rallis replied. "But it seems to be tracking us. Whoever they are waiting for us to make the next move." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. They had only just recovered from the last battle, and now a new threat appeared. Corin turned toward Virine. "We should ask Commander Mara to see this," he said. "He will know what it means." Virine hesitated for only a moment before nodding. "Yes, bring him." Corin left the command deck and made his way down to the lower levels. The corridors hummed softly, filled with the steady rhythm of the ship's engines. When he reached Mara's workspace, he found the human checking a power relay with quiet focus. His dark hair was slightly disheveled and a streak of grease marked his hand, but his expression remained calm. "Commander," Corin said, "we have detected something. A large ship following us. Captain Rallis wants you to see it." Mara wiped his hands with a cloth and rose from his seat. "Show me the readings," he said. Corin handed him the data tablet. Mara studied it for a moment, his brow furrowing slightly. "This signal pattern is not random," he said. "It looks like a command frequency. They are not just tracking us. They are testing our response." He placed the tablet aside and straightened. "We need to see it directly." Take me to the observation deck. When they arrived, the stars stretched out in silent beauty. Far in the distance, a faint glow shimmered against the darkness. At first it seemed like a star, but it moved slightly, growing larger with each second. It was not a natural object. It was a ship, and it was enormous. The vessel's shape was angular, almost crystalline, with sections that pulsed faintly with blue light. It had no visible weapons, yet its presence was intimidating. Mara studied it carefully. "They are testing us," he said again. "They want to see how we react before they approach." Corin swallowed. "Do you think they will attack?" "Maybe," Mara said quietly. "But not yet. They are watching first. They want to know if we are worth the effort." Vereen arrived at the observation deck. "What do you think it is?" she asked. Mara turned to her. "It might be a reconnaissance ship from an unknown fleet. If we show fear, they will see us as weak. If we act with aggression, they will see us as a threat. We must act with balance." She nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful. "You always find calm in these moments." "I do not understand how." Mara gave a faint smile. "Calm is not the absence of fear. It is what you hold on to when fear tries to take control." They returned to the command deck where the crew waited anxiously. The strange ship had drawn closer, its glowing lights now visible through the main viewport. Captain Rallis turned to Mara. "What do you suggest, Commander?" Mara studied the display carefully. "Activate the external beacons," he said. "Broadcast a standard alliance greeting. Show them we are aware of them, but not afraid. Keep our shields active, but do not aim our weapons. We will wait for their response." The crew obeyed quickly. The beacons flashed, sending a calm signal of recognition across space. For several minutes there was no reply. The tension in the room grew thicker with each passing second. Then the strange ship responded. A wave of light rippled across its surface. A moment later, a message appeared on the communication screen, written in symbols that shifted and reformed. The translation system struggled but managed to decode a few words. "Observation complete. Assessment pending." Rallis frowned. "Observation complete? What does that mean?" Mara leaned closer. "It means they were testing us. Now they will decide what to do." Before anyone could respond, the ship began to emit a low hum that vibrated through the eclipse. Energy readings spiked. The crew held their breath. The sensors showed a power buildup unlike anything they had seen before. Vereen turned to Mara, fear flickering in her silver eyes. "Are they attacking?" Mara watched the readings. "Not yet. They are preparing to jump away. They will return later or send others." The light from the alien ship flared brightly, and in an instant it vanished into the black. The eclipse's sensors went quiet. The space ahead was empty once again. Rallis exhaled. "We are safe for now. But they will be back." Mara nodded slowly. "Yes, they have learned enough to come better prepared. We need to prepare too." The next hours were filled with work. Mara led the repairs and upgrades, guiding the engineers with quiet authority. He designed new sensor systems that could detect energy fluctuations earlier and improved the shield regulators to withstand stronger impacts. He did not sleep. His focus never broke. Vereen often found herself watching him as he worked. Every movement he made was deliberate and thoughtful. He never raised his voice. He did not demand obedience. Yet everyone around him followed his lead without hesitation. The crew trusted him completely, not because of rank, but because of the calm strength he carried. Late one evening, Mara stood again on the observation deck. The stars stretched endlessly before him, and for a moment he simply watched them in silence. Vereen joined him quietly. "You have changed the ship," she said. "Everything feels different now. Even the way we think feels different." Mara looked at her. "You have all changed yourselves," he said. "You chose to face fear with purpose instead of panic. That is the hardest thing to learn." She shook her head gently. "No, it was you who showed us that path. I see now what I could not before. When I spoke cruelly to you, I thought humans acted without reason. I thought courage was only pride. But I was wrong. It is something deeper." Mara remained quiet for a moment. "Humans act because they must. Fear and reason both have their place, but neither can replace the will to try again. That is what keeps us alive." Vereen turned toward the window, her expression softening. "You remind me of something ancient. Something I had forgotten. You remind me that hope is not weakness. It is strength." They stood together in silence, the stars reflecting in the glass before them. The hum of the ship surrounded them like a steady heartbeat. For the first time since their argument, peace settled between them. The next day, Captain Rallis called a meeting in the council chamber. The air was tense but focused. The crew knew that whatever force had followed them might return. They needed a plan. Mara entered the room quietly, wearing his simple uniform. His armor still rested on the table where he had left it before walking away. When he passed it, he stopped for a moment, his hand brushing lightly against the metal surface. The crew watched him in silence. Vereen stood nearby, eyes lowered. Mara did not put the armor on. Instead, he looked around the table and said, "We do not need armor to face what comes next. What we need is unity. The ship survives when we act as one, not when we act alone." Every face turned toward him, listening. His words carried no anger, no pride, only calm certainty. "The next time they come," he said, "we will be ready. Not because we are stronger, but because we will not give up." Vereen lifted her gaze to him. "You will lead us then?" she asked quietly. Mara met her eyes. "I will stand with you," he said. That is what leadership means. A quiet respect filled the room. The crew felt the truth of his words. They had seen him walk away once, but now they saw that he had never truly left. He had simply waited for them to understand what strength really meant. The meeting ended with new resolve. Plans were made, strategies prepared, and hope restored. The Eclipse sailed forward again, guided by the human who had set down his armor but carried something far stronger within himself. Later, as the ship continued through the endless stars, Mara stood once more at the observation deck. The stars glimmered like scattered fire, endless and cold, yet full of possibility. He placed his hand on the glass, feeling the faint vibration of the engines. The ship was ready. The crew was ready. Whatever came next, they would face it together. And for the first time since his departure, Mara smiled, calm, quiet, and certain that humanity's true strength was not in armor, but in the heart that never stopped trying. The starship Eclipse glided silently through the starry expanse. After the encounter with the unknown vessel and the successful defense of the mining colony, the crew moved with renewed confidence. Systems ran smoothly and morale was high, yet the presence of Mara, the human who had walked away from cruelty and returned with calm strength, was more important than ever. The alien ambassador Vereen walked slowly through the corridors. The memory of her harsh words still lingered in her mind. She had underestimated humans before. She had judged Mara by the surface, by what she thought of as recklessness. But now, after seeing his calm leadership and unwavering courage, she could no longer ignore the truth. Humans were extraordinary in ways she had never understood. Vereen paused outside the lower maintenance decks. She could hear Mara moving among the consoles, his hands adjusting small systems, checking power conduits and reading sensor outputs. The human never paused for attention or praise. Everything he did was for the ship and the people aboard it. She stepped inside quietly. Mara looked up and offered a faint smile as though he had expected her arrival. "Ambassador," he said, voice calm, "is there something you need?" Vereen hesitated. Her silver eyes reflected the soft glow of the overhead lights. I wanted to understand," she said slowly. "I wanted to understand why you act the way you do, why you came back to the command deck when the fleet needed you, even after I spoke those cruel words." Mara studied her for a moment. "You wanted understanding, not apology?" he asked. "Yes," she admitted. "I have pride. I did not want to admit I was wrong. But I see now, humans are not guided by pride alone. You act because it is necessary. You act because you do not give up even when fear and doubt are present." Mara nodded. "Humans are not fearless. We feel fear and doubt as much as anyone, but we also feel responsibility. We act because someone must. We act because hope is worth holding, even when it seems small." Vereen's gaze shifted toward the console. She noticed the way Mara's hands moved, precise and deliberate, solving problems silently as he spoke. He did not seek recognition, and yet his influence was everywhere. The ship was stronger because of him. The crew had survived because of him. "I thought courage was only pride," she said softly. "I thought humans acted recklessly, ignoring consequences. I see now. It is something else entirely. You weigh the impossible, calculate the unknown, and still move forward. That is remarkable." Mara returned his attention to the systems for a moment before answering. "Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is acting despite fear. Humans do not act without thought. We act with understanding, patience, and persistence. That is what allows us to endure." Vereen studied him silently. For the first time, she felt a shift in her own understanding. Her pride was no longer the strongest part of her. The truth she saw in Mara was something deeper, an ability to endure and guide, not because of armor or strength, but because of the will to do what is right. She stepped closer. "I see why the fleet respects you," she said. "They do not follow you because of fear or authority. They follow because they trust you completely, and they know you will not abandon them." Mara's eyes softened. Trust is earned. It is not given freely, but once it exists, it carries more weight than fear or anger. That is why I walk with my crew, not ahead of them. The room was quiet except for the hum of the ship's engines. Virine felt a strange warmth in her chest, a sense of understanding she had never known. She realized that humans were capable of more than logic or calculation could measure. They survived, adapted, and led through patience, courage, and persistence. "I have always valued logic," Virine admitted. "I thought reason alone could solve problems. I see now that there is more than logic. There is strength in hope, in resilience, and in the calm certainty of action. You have shown me that." Mara nodded slowly. "Humans act not for glory, not for recognition, and not for pride. We act because it is necessary. Every small action builds toward survival, toward progress. Sometimes it is visible, sometimes it is unseen, but it always matters." Virine's eyes shone with quiet admiration. "I misjudged your kind," she said. "I see it now. You are not reckless. You are steady, patient, and relentless. You endure, and you inspire others to endure as well." Mara turned slightly and looked toward the observation deck. Stars stretched endlessly across the glass, distant suns casting light across the ship. "Humans survive because we find strength in connection," he said. "We do not act alone. We act with each other. That is what gives us hope, and that is what makes us strong." Virine looked out at the stars beside him. "I have learned much from you," she said. "Not just about leadership or courage, but about what it means to act rightly. I will not forget this lesson." Mara gave a small smile. "Lessons are only valuable if they are remembered. Actions only matter if they are applied. You have taken the first step toward understanding, and that is enough." The days passed on the eclipse, yet the shadow of the unknown fleet remained. Sensors picked up distant signals, yet none approached. Mara continued his quiet guidance, working among the engineers, helping the crew solve small problems and preparing for the next challenge. His presence was calm, but his influence was everywhere. The crew began to understand the truth he had shown them. Leadership was not about yelling orders. Leadership was not about strength alone. Leadership was about patience, understanding, and acting when it was needed most. Humans, they realized, could do this in ways no other species could. Virine often walked the corridors beside Mara. She observed how he interacted with the crew, not as a commander, but as someone who cared deeply about their safety and well-being. He never sought recognition, yet he earned respect through action. She had spoken cruelly to him once, and yet he had returned not with anger but with strength and calm guidance. The human had shown her the essence of hope. He had demonstrated that courage was not pride, that leadership was not authority, and that strength was measured not by power, but by perseverance. One evening, Mara and Virine stood together on the observation deck. The stars stretched endlessly before them, cold yet full of promise. Virine turned to him and said, "I understand now. Humans endure because they act, not because they believe they will succeed, but because they cannot do otherwise. That is what makes you remarkable." Mara nodded quietly. "We do not always win. We do not always know the outcome, but we continue because stopping is never an option. That is what allows us to survive, and to help others survive as well." Virine looked at him, and for the first time she felt humility without shame. She realized that humans were extraordinary not because of their weapons or their technology, or even their courage. They were extraordinary because they refused to stop trying. The days became weeks. The eclipse continued its journey through the stars, and Mara continued to guide the crew with quiet strength. Small victories and small acts of care reinforced the ship's stability. Every repair he made, every instruction he gave, and every silent encouragement strengthened not just the vessel, but the people aboard it. Virine watched him often. She saw the human who had walked away from cruel words return, not for revenge or recognition, but to act when it was necessary. She understood at last that this quiet strength was the true measure of humanity. One morning, as the sun of a distant planet rose across the viewport, Mara gathered the crew. He did not wear his armor. He stood among them, simple and calm, yet commanding attention without trying. We have faced challenges, he said softly. And we have survived because we acted. We have survived because we did not give in to fear. Remember this. Every small action matters. Every choice matters. And together we are stronger than any danger we will face. The crew listened intently. Vereen stood beside Mara, silent and reflective. She understood fully now that this human, who had walked away once in silence, had taught them more than any lesson from a council or manual. He had shown them the true meaning of courage, leadership, and humanity. After the meeting, Mara returned to the observation deck. The stars stretched endlessly before him, calm and unchanging. Vereen approached and stood beside him. They did not speak for a moment, simply watching the vastness together. Finally, Vereen spoke. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for showing me what it means to endure, to lead, and to act rightly. I will not forget this, and I will not underestimate your kind again." Mara smiled faintly. "Do not thank me," he said. "I acted because it was necessary. Remember, the strength of humans is not in what they wear or what they carry. It is in what they are willing to do when it matters most."